If we adopt a grading string for the edge of this driveway here, what we can do with the grading string is get it to reference live the road design and also update, meaning that if for whatever reason we make any changes to this original road here, or if we need to maybe go and change one of the finished floor levels later on, this entire grading string and any associated surface model will automatically update for us using what we call a thread. Let's begin by creating the grading string first of all. So we're going to head to grading strings, right click, create grading, and then pick our polyline. Now, just before we pick the polyline, I should just mention that this polyline doesn't necessarily overlap with the edge of the road design. And in actual fact, good practice would dictate that you don't overlap your grading string onto this road surface here. You may be thinking, well, how are we going to reference the road design surface? And we're going to manage that through a tool called Surface Extend a little bit later on. So I'm going to pick my polyline, going to give this a name. We're going to call it driveway 1. We're not going to put a template on there. We don't need a shape, but you could if you wanted to. We're not going to be changing the target surface from the Civil 3D NS that we have here. If we wanted to, we could nominate a different elevation for this grading string all the way through, but 46 is absolutely fine. And then for the spacing, we're actually going to leave the spacing at quite a high value. So if you've used grading strings before, you may have probably put a small number to give you extra detail or extra sections around your design. I'm not interested in that. All I want is for the software to pick up the changes of horizontal geometry for me, and they are the locations where I want to assign levels. So I'm actually going to make this number much longer than the longest straight that is found in my design. We don't need to worry about corner angle increments and methods because we're not applying a template. Important that we don't build a surface. We do not need a surface being applied here because if we have a surface of just this grading string, it's going to look a bit odd. What we want to do is build a surface which is in association with the road, which we'll do a little bit later on with Model Builder. So I'm going to click Create Update. Now, not a great deal happens on screen, but I know that the grading string is being created because I can now head to the vertical grading tab. See, I've got a grid view now of the IPs, and then I can open up the vertical grading editor, which is also what I'm going to do. So you can see here that the vertical grading editor is picking up for me sections where I have changes in horizontal geometry. The clue in the vertical grading editor is also where you see these green lines. Now, we do have an arc that has been created in this area here. Now, if you have an arc with a radius less than 1 meter, the software will only sample around there with quarter points. And what you may find is if you put a template on there or come to do some modeling later, you end up with this sort of jagged looking arc. So what we should do, first of all, is just introduce some extra sections onto this arc, giving us some nice detail. That'll become apparent later on. So all I'm going to do is just head over to Toolspace, just refresh Toolspace. My grading string will appear. I can right click in version 26 and insert sections by clicking on this button. What we're going to do is just to say between this TP here and this TP here, give me spacings of every 100 mil. Nice detail. So we set this number to 0.1. We pick start end extents. It's important you know the direction of your grading string. Pick the first point here. In fact, I'm going to just use my endpoint snap here to make sure I pick it up. And then it's asking me for the end chainage. Click here. And we've now, you can actually see the section lines appear automatically, which is nice. That will give me some nice detail going around that particular arc. I can click OK. If you're not using version 26 of Civil Site Design, you would have to manage this a slightly different way. You'd have to come up to the Roads tab, Edit Panel, click on the Resample section pull down, and then click somewhere near or on top of your grading string, and that form will then display, whereas 26 users now get that at the right click of tool space. Now we've done that, how do we add IPs at these individual locations here? So there's a few ways you can do that, and the grid editor is actually the best way to help manage adding IPs because you can snap into the drawing using the grid editor as opposed to snapping within the vertical grading editor to locate your IPs. To add IPs based on the drawing, we can click this button here. When you click, you can then snap, and what you'll find is that you get an IP added in the vertical grading editor at exactly that location, and then you can edit its elevation. So what we might do is just type in 46.31, and then we'll use that tool again, add IP, And you can see it actually inherits the previous IP's elevation, meaning I don't actually have to type anything. So the great thing about grading strings is we're not enforcing changes or IPs for you at every change of direction. You can add them in wherever you want. To save a little bit of time here, what we can also do is add IPs based on any change in horizontal direction on our grading string. You can use this button here to do this. So if I click on this button, we'll be prompted to merge these new IPs with our existing design, and you'll see why when we click yes. So all that happens is the software now goes and finds all of those changes of direction, including those arc quarter points, and then places IPs on that existing design for you to use. So I know that, for example, the IP here that chain is 15.337, that needs to be set at that floor level, as does the one further down. So what I'm going to do is come to 15.337, type in 46.58. You could use the vertical grading editor for this if you wanted to. You don't have to use the grid to edit the IP, but this is just a nice, neat, quick way of being able to do it. Now I've got extra IPs in there, which maybe I don't want. I don't necessarily need to set the level here at the moment. I certainly don't need to be setting the level here. So I'm going to delete those just using delete IP. And I'm going to leave the one in the middle here because I want to set that to the road level later on and get rid of the others. So now we've set these manually, we now want to reference the road design for the start, the middle, and the end. And we're now going to look at building what we call a surface extend to help us manage that.